An effective business strategy is in and of itself a strategic advantage. I can't tell you how many businesses I've seen who don't have a clearly defined strategy, who can't articulate their strategy, and therefore they can't execute an effective strategy. It is the absolute majority. So by choosing to master this area, to master the area of strategy, you are giving yourself a massive, massive strategic advantage. And here's the great thing about strategy. Master the disciplines to build strategy now, and you continue to grow those disciplines and build on those disciplines throughout your business career. This is a learnable skill, and what I'm going to do in this course is break down what the areas are that you need to develop. Now, this video is very much meant as an adjunct to the book that goes with this course, because you're going to need a lot more detail than I'm going to give you in the video. And that detail is contained in the book. What I want to do in this video is talk around some of the key areas to give you a bit of additional context, to give you my perspective a bit more about those areas. So as I said, this is very much meant to go with the book. Now, before we talk about strategy, it's really critical to talk about alignment. The old paradigm in business was you should work on your weaknesses and improve those weaknesses. The new paradigm is focus on your strengths and you get exponential results. There is a lot of research that shows that focusing on your strengths gives you a much better return on your time than focusing on your weaknesses. So when it comes to building a strategy, it's really important that you focus on your strengths. Not only your strengths, but you focus on the things that you like to do, the things that you want to do. Now, it's really important, I think, at this point to point out that there are two types of people in business. You know, it's also a spectrum, so there are people in between. But at one end of the spectrum are people who, if you build a strategy for them that they don't like necessarily exactly what they have to do within that strategy, then they just will not do it. They'll find every reason to procrastinate. They'll find every reason to put it off, to try something else, and they just won't execute on the strategy unless it's 100% aligned with exactly what it is they want to do. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is someone who will just go, I'll do whatever it takes to move this forward, to execute on the strategy. Now, that means that they're going to be working on things that they don't like, the things that they aren't necessarily good at. And I think that actually what you want to do is find a bit of a medium point between these. I think it's important to consider what you like as you build your strategy, but it's also critically important to accept the fact that you're going to need to do things you don't like to do, things that you don't want to do, particularly in the early phases of business. Look, heck, when I started MedRecruit, which is my company, which is now doing 40 million revenue, we've got over 100 staff across 2 countries. But when I started, it was just me and Claire, my then girlfriend, now wife, and we had to do everything. We had to do the marketing and the sales and the recruitment and the placement support and the accounting and the finance and the strategy. I mean, every single thing in the business came down to us. Now, if I had at that point said, well, but I don't like doing accounting, well, then we probably would never have got any invoices out and would have never got paid. So I had to do things I didn't want to do. But here's the key point, I think, around alignment. Alignment doesn't have to be for the immediate term. I think what you need to do when it comes to alignment, and I really believe strongly, is you need to build a strategy that moves you to a point where you are really playing to your strengths, where you're really doing the things that you love to do. If you can do that with your strategy, then I think you can put up with the things that you don't necessarily like to do in the short term. I think the problem with strategies when it comes to a lack of alignment is when people build a strategy that sets an end point that they don't really actually want to achieve. It might be great for the business, it might be a very clever strategy, but if it gets them to a point, if the target is something they don't want, that's when you have a real problem. So when I'm talking about alignment, I'm talking about that target. I'm talking about what it is you're moving towards, not necessarily just the bits and pieces of what you have to do right now. Because you know what? If you're in a startup business, you're going to have to do some things you don't like to do. So bear that in mind as you build your strategy. Make sure you're painting a target that is truly compelling, that is truly going to move you, and is going to help you to do the things that you don't necessarily like to do in the short term. Now, moving on to strategy. The key with strategy, and I want you to listen really closely to this, is that an effective strategy solves a problem that is worthy of solving. I'll say it again, it solves a problem that needs to be solved. A strategy is not just goal setting. It's building a strategy is not just saying, here's what I want, and then there's my strategy. A great strategy solves a customer's problem that they really, really want to solve. They need to solve. They may not even be aware of your solution, but it's a burning pain that needs to be solved. When it comes to defining that problem, there are certain things you can do. I mean, I think one of the important things is that you want to define a problem, a single problem. Define a single thing and become the best at solving that single thing. It's important that you define a problem that you can solve. You know, if you're in the business of, for example, literacy, child literacy, books in schools, for example, and you're not going to solve the problem necessarily of world hunger. So you've got to define a problem that you actually is within your remit to solve. And I think it's really important as well when you're building a strategy that you define it and you think about it consciously as, am I solving an external problem or am I solving an internal problem? And strategies can shift. I'll give you an example of that. With my business MedRecruit, the initial problem that we solved was that 25% of doctors were leaving medicine within 3 years of graduation, and I defined that as a problem as medicine hasn't evolved to cater to the lifestyle that a younger generation of doctors want. We built a strategy to solve that problem, and we grew really quickly. We were in the Deloitte Fast 50, we were the fastest growing service business in the country. But we got to a point where we then went backwards for a while, and I redefined the problem. And I said, it's not an external problem, because I kept trying to build a strategy to solve the external problem, redefine the external problem. But I missed the fact that we had an internal problem, that we hadn't developed best practice recruitment expertise. So my problem became defined internally as, we're not that great at recruitment, and my strategy was built to solve that problem. Until I redefined the problem, until I redefined it from an external to an internal problem, nothing that I did made any difference. So it's really important to think about this consciously and go, how am I going to define the problem? And then I think it's also important to consider, as you build your strategy and as you define the problem, that you use a combination of both data and intuition. You know, data in and of itself is not going to give you your strategy, because probably most people have access to that data. But equally, neither is probably intuition. You want to combine the two. Use your intuition, interpret the data, and define the problem in a way that you can then solve. Because that's the first step in building a strategy, is the diagnosis. It's the diagnosis of the worthy challenge. What is the problem we're solving? And then the next step is, you know, the one-liner. What is our governing approach to achieving that? How are we going to do that? To give you that example before, when we defined ours from an external to an internal problem, the diagnosis is, we're not great at recruitment. The governing approach became build best practice recruitment expertise. It's really simple, but man, it was effective. It turned the company back around. We doubled revenue within a year because we effectively defined the most appropriate problem. So that's the first thing. The diagnosis, and you solve a problem. It's not about what do you want. The market couldn't care less what you want. It's about what needs to be solved. What are you being called to do? What are you being called to step up to? So that's really the fundamental principle around building an effective strategy. But when we talk about actually then going on to build your strategy, within the book you have my template of the 3-page business plan, the 3-page strategic plan. Now there are some core principles around that. Clearly it's about solving a problem, but beyond that it really starts at a high level. The whole plan, it starts big and then gets granular. And that's the key. I think you always need this, you want to start big and get granular, because that's effectively reverse engineering your solution. If you put the solution before the problem, then you're just making stuff up. I always want to tie it to metrics. So no matter what you do, you're going to build some metrics to determine whether you're winning or losing, whether you're moving in the right direction or moving in the wrong direction. And I think the key about a good business strategy is it will drive prioritization. And it does that through a number of ways. You start big picture and then you become granular So it helps you prioritize what the things are you need to do. And it also means that the way we build the strategy, the strategic plan, is that we define exactly who's doing what when they're doing it. So we set those priorities in advance, and that gives us a reference point to not just go wherever the most noise is. So that's really, really important. So look at the strategic plan that you have in the book there and start big. And I know people have looked at this and they've been tempted to skip some of the first stuff. I really encourage you not to do that. I really encourage you to get clear on your vision. What is that big picture what is the big picture change that you're looking to make? Get really clear on that. Get clear on your ultimate target. You know, what percentage of market share do you want? What is it that you want, the change that you want to implement? Get clear on that, because if you don't, I'm really telling you that you're kind of putting the cart before the horse. Get clear on the sandbox that you play in. And by that I mean, where are you choosing to define where your business operates? Get clear on that. Get clear on the diagnosis, as we talked about, and the governing approach. Document your brand attributes and how you're going to measure those attributes, because this is something that's going to then become a filter that you filter everything through. You then move from there into your 3 to 5 year outcomes, your measures to achieve those. You then move those to your 1 year outcomes, your measures to achieve those, and then your quarterly outcomes and your measures to achieve those. As you can see, it's so logical because it starts big and it goes small. And by doing that, you put the horse before the cart, you help to prioritize your actions, and you help to set yourself a trajectory that's going to get you to the target that you want to achieve. Because that's so important. If you're building a business, you want to be doing it to achieve a certain target, and it's got to be a target that's meaningful for you. It's going to deliver what you want, and it's going to implement a change in the market that you really want to achieve. So that's really the key around the 3-page strategic plan. I encourage you to do it. Do not underestimate the power of having in 3 pages your whole business strategy. It's pretty much, it's templated for you to do. You just got to go through the process of do it. Now, I think the key as well when you build a strategy is you always got to think execution at the same time as strategy. That's why the 4th page of the 3-page plan is, the accountabilities. Who's doing what in this coming quarter? And that's really important to have that. But beyond that, it's really important I think one of the most important things when it comes to execution is around your business rhythm. And your rhythm ties your strategic plan to your people and what they do. Your rhythm is your modus operandi for your business. It's how you do things. And I think when it comes to the rhythm, it's important to, again, like the strategic plan, start big and go small. So the key with the rhythm is documenting the meetings in your business. Now, why is it important to do this? Look, if you don't define a meeting, when it's going to happen, what the key outcomes of that meeting are and who's going to be involved and what the outputs are, you're just going to have a lot of catch-ups, spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time. So defining a rhythm means that you can set your strategic meetings, you can set your executional meetings, and you can make sure that there are no gaps. You can make sure that the strategy is going to be effectively trickled down into the business and executed on, and it also brings that loop around again to feed that executional information back to the people making strategic decisions. So I'll give you an example. In my business, we have a quarterly strategic meeting as a management team. This is to review strategy, to look if there's any resets required, to reprioritize what we've set for the coming quarter. Next, after that'll happen in the first week or 2 of a quarter. After that comes the divisional meetings, the departmental quarterly. And that is effectively saying, okay, here are the key outcomes that have been set for the business. What are you guys going to do in this period of time? And so and then they also look at their key projects and look at what's working, what's not working from a strategic perspective, not an executional perspective at this point, and they reprioritize the key outcomes for the coming quarter. We then trickle that down a step and we start looking at what are we doing on a monthly perspective. Management on a monthly perspective is looking at progress to the strategic plan. So we're tying execution and strategy in a monthly meeting. Departments are doing the same thing. If we pull that back down to a weekly, then weekly becomes, and even daily, then they become very, very execution focused. It's very much looking at what are the metrics and what are we looking to solve, what are the challenges we're facing, how can we help each other solve them. So we make sure that we've got meetings to tie the strategy to the departments to the people, and strategy through to execution. So what I'd encourage you to do is, as you build, once you've built your strategy, you could do it in parallel, but you want to build a rhythm that ties strategy to execution, that takes this lofty strategy and ties it to the people on the front line who are executing to achieve that big vision. So strategy, it's really not something that's particularly complicated, but it requires a systematic approach to it. So, excuse me, I would encourage you to read the document really closely, go through the process, go through the exercises, and build that strategy, because as I said, your strategy becomes a key strategic advantage when you do it effectively. Thanks for watching.